You know, what would be better? For them to have lived their entire life in Africa free, doing their voodoo or whatever, and then dying and going to hell, right? Or what happened? And then they go to heaven. They get the opportunity. And you know what? I bet you there's a lot of Africans that if they hadn't have been brought over, not saying it was right, don't misunderstand, not justifying the slavery in the situation, but God, I still believe, used it. And now I'm sure there's a lot of Africans that got the gospel and they're in heaven right now because they got the gospel.
So according to this European person, slavery gave us as African people the opportunity to die and go to heaven, because he gave us this choice. Which one would be better? Was it for us as African people to remain in Africa freely without slavery, for us to remain in Africa practicing our voodoo, die and go to hell, or for them to come and enslave us, at least, and if for nothing, introduce the gospel to us so that we'll die and go to heaven? Which one? So Africans, choose for yourself. Which one would you would have preferred? For Africa to be free from the colonial criminals, the bondage by the colonial criminals, for us to be free practicing our voodoo. And who even told him that the entire African continent was practicing voodoo? And who told him that voodoo is a bad thing that can lead you to hell? And what hell and heaven is he talking about? Because we in Africa didn't know anything like this. So which one is he talking about? And must your God introduce himself to us as African people through slavery? If that is what you are saying, then we reject that God. Because that same God, your God, he could have introduced himself to us without you people being enslaving us. But he has to introduce his gospel to us through your enslavement. And then you think it's better, at least because we will die and go to heaven. What is the evidence that the gospel that you gave to us can really lead us to us as African people to your heaven? And then will you want to sit in that same heaven with us? Because if on this planet Earth you don't want to be with us, then will you want to sit in that heaven with us? Will you want to be in that same heaven with us? And then which enslavement is he talking about? This is an insult to us as African people. But I don't blame him, because even as we speak, we have Africans who believe that, at least if for nothing, slavery was good for us, because slavery brought us the same thing that he's talking about. It gave us the gospel. But if you listen to our Queen Mother, if you listen to this Queen Mother, what the horrific stuff that our ancestors went through, as an African, you will be annoyed to hear somebody telling you that it was good for your ancestors to go through the horror that they went through, purposely because they were given a gospel. Listen to our Queen Mother. Let's listen to her. Come back and talk about it.
As an enslaved African woman, you had no rights to your own body. No rights at all to your own body. And it didn't start when you were a woman. You know, that's the other kind of mythology when we talk about rapes. We're thinking about women. You think they waited till they were 18? You think few girls got to teenage years without having been raped? To imagine being a mother. Someone just comes in the middle of the night and says, you know, we have some visitors. They like young ones. So we're going to pass her along to the visitors that night. So you can't wrap your head around that. And we want to really believe that, well, that just happened a couple of times. Well, according to a mid-1800s census, there are over 600,000 mixed-race babies born. That's a lot of sneaking out back.
Yes. So just imagine what a special the enslaved African woman had to go through. Imagine what our ancestors have to go through. And then today, we have people who are justifying it because this same colonial European criminals gave us something they call the gospel. So the God who knows everything, the God who is the most, who have the power, who see the future, that same God, he couldn't have picked somebody from Africa and then gave that person the gospel peacefully so that our ancestors will not be enslaved, so that Africa will not be colonized. The same God couldn't have done that. He has to send Europeans to come and enslave our ancestors, colonize Africa, and then give us the gospel so that we can die and sit in the same and live in the same heaven with the colonial criminals. If that is the case, then we have to reject that God, because that God was not fair on us as African people. That God wasn't fair on us because, as I said, we have North Africa, we have Southern Africa, we have East Africa, West Africa, Central Africa. That God couldn't have picked somebody from Nigeria. He couldn't have picked an Igbo man and then introduce and give him that gospel. That God couldn't have picked a Yoruba man and give him that gospel peacefully to give to us. He couldn't have picked a Zulu man, a Kosa man, a Kukeyo man, a Dagomba man, an Ashanti man. He couldn't have picked nobody from Zimbabwe to give us that gospel peacefully so that we will not be enslaved. He has to pick somebody from Europe. And then the Europeans have to come and enslave our people, our ancestors, and take them through all this horrific experience in order for him to introduce a gospel to us so that when we die, we'll go to heaven. Can we imagine the insult? And Africans, unfortunately, we have Africans who accept this, who believe in that, because an African has ever told me this, an African from Cape Coast in Ghana, where the slave dangers are. An African from that place, I had a conversation with him and I asked him, has he ever been visited the slave danger? He said to me, for him, it's just a walking distance from his house, but it really doesn't matter to him because he doesn't see anything wrong with slavery. An African, he doesn't see anything wrong with slavery because, according to him, just as this man is saying, at least the Europeans brought us education and also their religion. That when we die, we'll go to heaven. I've heard an African saying that. So for a European to say this, it's not something new, but it's very insulting to our ancestors, because if you know what our ancestors been through, then for you to say that God has to use that opportunity to give us the gospel, there could not be anything insulting to our ancestors than this. But yes, that is how the world is. If you allow yourself, God created man and man created his reality. If you allow another man to create you, if you allow another man, he will create your reality for you. And then future generations will even blame you. Today we have people, Africans, who are blaming our ancestors for what happened to us. Yes, there were some of our ancestors who compromised to enslave our people. But no heaven, no going to heaven can justify what happened to our ancestors or what happened to Africa. As we speak today, Africans are still perishing in the Mediterranean Sea, purposely because of what happened to to the continent of Africa 400 years ago and still happening to us. So nothing, no heaven or whatever can justify what happened to us as African people. And I'm sure this man didn't read the King Leopold letter, because how can we, the indigenous people, the original people, the first people on this planet Earth, doesn't know God until you people arrive? That means that God must be very, very partial. Because if God created the black man and the black woman, and there was no any other race living on this planet Earth, and God could not introduce himself to us, we have to wait for thousands of years for that God to create a European race, and then they will come to Africa and enslave us before he could introduce a gospel to us. Then that God is really a partial God. But King Leopold, in his letter, he said it, that I am not, to his missionaries, he said it, I am not sending you to Africa to teach the people God, what God is. Because for God, they already know. According to King Leopold, for God, our ancestors already know God. For morality, we already have, we know morality even more than that. We are the first people that God created. So we know everything. But I'm giving you a task. Go there and teach them to hate everything about themselves and love everything about us as Europeans. And till today, we, the citizens of Congo, we are still suffering from the letter that King Leopold and his missionary, or the damage that King Leopold and his missionary did to us as African people. And that is why we are here in One African Mission. So please support our mission. Let us overcome this spell that the Europeans cast on us. Let us do that. We knew God before they came. And I don't want to go deep into this, but all that I'll tell you as an African person is that let us stand up, let us wake up and realize that this is not a joke. I thank you very much for coming around. Please, if you appreciate what we are doing, then support our mission, One African Mission. We are on a mission, and our mission is all about our unity and our dignity as a people. If we want dignity as African people, then we must unite the continent of Africa, because it is through unity that we can regain back our dignity. Thank you very much for coming around. Please support our mission. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also follow us on Facebook, One African Mission. On TikTok, the number One African Mission. We are planning Southern Africa, to go to Southern Africa. Please support our mission by sharing what we are doing. And also, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. Let us all together fight for a dignified Africa, not just for us, but for the next generation of Africans. Thank you very much.